Hello everyone, welcome to the very first explosive episode of Nuclear Revenge, where justice isn't just served, it's delivered with fire. Today, I've got not one, but two jaw-dropping stories that take revenge to a whole new level. This first story's titled "My Boss Set Me Up to Get Fired, So I Took Down His Entire Career." I wasn't always a man of silence. Once, I believed in the value of speaking up, of fairness, of being part of something that worked because decent people kept it together. That illusion died at Halberd Communications. It was a place people joined with good intentions and left quietly, if they were lucky. A sprawling concrete complex on the edge of the city, designed like a bunker and operated like a feudal court. You were either favored or disposable, nothing in between. I learned that the hard way. My name is Darren. I was 35 when I started there, a mid-level network engineer, divorced, no kids, one sister who lived 3 states away. My resume was solid, my references glowing. I didn't expect to be worshipped, just respected. I didn't know then how expensive respect would be. My direct manager was Bryce, an aging frat boy wrapped in a tech bro's skin. He got the job after a strategic restructuring which saw 5 qualified engineers laid off overnight. Bryce didn't know the difference between a router and a switch. What he did know was whose hand to shake, whose ego to stroke, and how to throw others under the bus with Olympic precision. At first, I kept my head down. I handled my projects well, met deadlines, solved legacy messes no one else would touch. My coworkers leaned on me quietly. Of course, no one wanted Bryce thinking anyone other than him was making the gears turn. Then came the restructuring. Again. Suddenly I was senior tech lead, a title with no raise and double the responsibility. I inherited a crumbling VoIP migration project and a 5-person team half filled with interns. Bryce, naturally, took all the credit for our progress. But when a senior exec's call dropped during a board presentation, it wasn't Bryce who got called into a closed-door meeting. That was the beginning of the end. Bryce started gaslighting me, subtle at first. "I told you that in the meeting, Darren. Weren't you listening?" Or, "That email? Weird, I never got it. Must have slipped through." Then, less subtle, missed meetings he never invited me to, approvals he forgot to file, tasks he redirected to junior staff behind my back and then blamed me for when they flopped. When I brought it up to HR, they smiled with all the warmth of a granite slab. "We'll look into it," they said. 2 days later, I was put on a performance improvement plan. A PIP, my death sentence. I'll never forget that meeting. "We're just concerned," Bryce said, faux concern lacing every word like venom. "Your attitude, Darren, it's not collaborative. And your team says they're confused about direction. Maybe a coaching course would help?" I stared at him across the glass table and realized he wanted me gone. Not because I was failing, because I knew too much, because I reminded people that he wasn't competent. And sooner or later, someone in a higher chair might ask the wrong question. I should have left. I didn't. Instead, I began collecting. Collecting meant documenting every missing email, every Slack message he deleted, every time a junior came to me confused about an assignment that had magically changed direction without my knowledge. I started forwarding everything to a private email. I logged times, dates, inconsistencies. I even recorded our meetings. In my state, that's legal if one party consents, and I did. But information alone wouldn't be enough. I needed leverage, and I found it where all true toxicity hides. In procurement. Bryce had signed off on a vendor contract for a cloud migration tool we never used. The invoices were real. The product wasn't. A $40,000 ghost payment, approved and paid to a shell company out of Nevada. He buried it inside the budget of a failed project and then claimed the failure was unexpected. But that wasn't all. I traced the company back to a P.O. box, and then to a name. Bryce's college roommate, a man who had once been fined by the FCC for signal tampering. I'd struck gold. I spent 3 weeks tightening the noose. I waited until our quarterly review cycle was about to kick in. Bryce had just been nominated for Leadership Excellence. He even got a photo shoot for the company's internal magazine. Meanwhile, I was scheduled to meet HR again about lack of alignment. Instead, I booked a meeting with someone else, Halberd's internal audit director, Nora Simmons. She didn't take meetings with engineers. I made sure she took this one. I dropped a manila envelope on her desk with a thumb drive. Said 4 words, "I suggest you listen." She called me back the same day. I wasn't prepared for how fast the dominoes fell. Compliance, legal, then the board. Within 2 weeks, Bryce had been suspended pending investigation. A week after that, he resigned for personal reasons. HR went silent. My PIP? Expunged. I got a formal apology and a new offer, team strategy consultant, a newly formed role with remote flexibility, a pay bump, and best of all, no direct manager. But that wasn't the revenge. Not yet. The real revenge came when I made an anonymous tip to the state fraud division. That shell company? Investigated. Bryce's friend? Indicted. Bryce himself? Facing charges of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and falsification of financial records. I watched his LinkedIn change from thought leader, innovator to open to work to nothing at all. Last I heard, he's living with his sister in Akron, under federal investigation. His reputation, his career, his golden parachute all gone. Erased not with noise, but with silence. Dead air. That's what he hears now. Every time he dials into a conference and no one's on the line. Every time he applies for a job and gets no call back. Every time someone Googles his name and finds the charges. And me? I sleep fine. I talk less now. People assume it's humility. It's not. It's because I've learned the truth. Sometimes silence isn't absence. It's control. This last story is titled Rock Bottom to Director. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what my life would look like at 37, I'd have said, stable, married, maybe a kid, a house where the floorboards don't creak and the air smells like Sunday. I would have been wrong on all counts. I was never supposed to be someone who broke. I was the eldest son, the fixer, the reliable one. I held my mother's hand when Dad died of a heart attack in the living room. I took night shifts at the warehouse while finishing my degree. I walked my younger sister through her divorce while patching my own marriage back together with duct tape and apologies. But life has a way of collecting weight. It started small, an unresolved cough, stress that didn't go away with sleep, waking up in the middle of the night with your heart racing like you missed something urgent. I ignored the signs, told myself I was just tired. Too many bills, too many people needing me. My wife, Erin, had started pulling away, and I didn't blame her. I'd barely recognized the guy I saw in the mirror anymore. Bloodshot eyes, hair graying at the temples, shoulders permanently hunched like I was waiting to be hit. Then the letter came, a layoff notice. After 8 years, no severance, just a thin envelope and a phone number to call if I had questions. I stood there in the kitchen, still in my work boots, staring at it like it was written in another language. Erin came down the stairs. I looked at her and said, "It's gone." She didn't ask what. She didn't need to. She just nodded and walked out the door. That night I sat in the driveway for hours. I couldn't go back inside. The silence in that house had teeth. I lit a cigarette, even though I quit 6 years ago, and stared at the glow until it burned my fingers. I think part of me wanted to feel something sharper than the numbness. Losing the job wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the voice in my head that whispered, this was always going to happen. You just weren't paying attention. I tried to hold it together. I applied for work, overqualified, underqualified, didn't matter. I spent hours every day writing cover letters, tweaking resumes, pretending I still had a shot. Erin started spending nights at her sister's. My bank account dwindled. I sold my tools, my guitar, even the ring I proposed to Erin with. Pawned it for gas money. Then came the night the heat went out. It was early February. Chicago cold. I was alone in the house. Erin had stopped coming back, and I knew she wasn't at her sister's anymore. I curled up under 3 blankets in the living room with the oven door open and a candle lit for heat. And I cried, for the first time in years. Not because I was cold, but because I finally understood what people meant when they said they were tired of trying. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened my laptop, stared at the glowing screen, and typed 4 words into Google, I don't want this. And then, I don't know what made me click it, but I saw a forum post. Someone had written, I lost my job, my wife, and my mind. But I'm still here. I'm still breathing. That has to count for something. I sat there staring at that sentence until the candle burned out. Still breathing. Maybe that did count for something. For a while, breathing was all I did. I started counting them, honestly, inhales and exhales like beads on a rosary. I needed proof that time was still moving, that I was still inside my body and not watching myself from somewhere far away. In the mornings, I made coffee. It tasted like ash, but I drank it. I showered. Some days I even dressed, even if I had nowhere to go. The hardest part was pretending I wasn't waiting for Erin to come home, even though I knew deep down she wouldn't. One day I came home from an errand and found the living room empty. The TV, the bookshelf, the couch, gone. She'd come when I wasn't home and taken what she wanted. I checked the bedroom and saw her side of the closet was bare. Just wire hangers swinging like wind chimes. No note, no call, just air. I sat down on the floor and laughed. Loud, ugly, that deep belly kind of laugh that breaks off into sobbing when you run out of sound. That night, I opened a bottle of whiskey and went out onto the fire escape. It was cold, and I welcomed it. The city buzzed beneath me, lights in motion, everyone moving forward like they'd never known how it felt to be left behind. I stared at the edge of the railing for a long time, and I thought about jumping, not because I wanted to die. Exactly. More like I didn't want to keep doing this. But then I thought of my mother, her hands after the funeral, how she gripped mine like I was the only thread keeping her tied to the earth. And I thought of my sister, Sarah, who used to call me her mountain when we were kids. You're steady, she said. You don't move, no matter what. And suddenly I was crying again. Not for myself, but because I realized if I disappeared, it wouldn't just be my absence that hurt people, it would be the lie I left behind. That I wasn't steady, that I didn't try. So I didn't jump. I climbed back into the apartment and curled up on the bare floor, wrapped in my winter coat, and promised myself I'd try one more day. That was the day I walked into a community job center, not one of those glossy placement agencies, but a battered storefront with a sign that said second start. It smelled like dust and bad coffee. The woman behind the counter looked like she'd seen every kind of broken. You here to talk? She asked. I think so, I said. She handed me a form and a pen that barely worked. Good. First step's the hardest. They didn't care that I'd once managed logistics for a major firm. Didn't care that I had a degree, that I could optimize spreadsheets in my sleep. They asked me what I wanted to do, and for once, I didn't have a rehearsed answer. So I said, I want to matter. I don't know how, but I want that. The woman, her name was Connie, smiled like she'd been waiting to hear that exact sentence. She told me about a shelter on the south side looking for part-time clerks. The pay was awful. The hours were worse. But it was something. Sometimes, she said, the best thing you can do for yourself is show up for someone else. I took the job. My first shift, a man named Terrence walked in with a black eye and a garbage bag full of torn clothes. He didn't ask for much, just somewhere warm to sit. I got him a blanket. He looked at me and said, "Thanks, I'm tired, man, been running a long time." I nodded. Me too. We didn't need more words than that. That job didn't fix everything. I was still broke, still sleeping on a mattress on the floor, but it gave my hands something to do. And slowly, piece by piece, I started building a version of myself that wasn't made of titles or relationships or broken promises. I got a haircut. I bought a used bike. I started taking long rides along the lake. I liked the cold air in my lungs. It reminded me I was still here. I sent Erin the divorce papers with a short note. No hard feelings. Just moving forward. She didn't respond, but I didn't need her to. One night, Sarah called me crying. Her ex had shown up drunk, pounding on her door. I drove across the city in the middle of the night and stood between them, saying nothing, just being there, like a mountain. When she finally calmed down, she looked at me and said, "I don't know how you do it." I didn't know either, but I knew this. I was still breathing, still climbing, still moving. The hardest part about coming back from the bottom isn't the work. It's the silence. No applause, no recognition, no headlines saying broken man becomes whole. It's just you stitching yourself back together one slow day at a time, hoping no one notices the seams. I kept working at the shelter. I learned names, stories, quiet rituals of survival. I started fixing things, broken cabinets, leaking pipes, anything I could get my hands on. It reminded me that I could still solve problems, still make something better, even if just by inches. Connie noticed. She always did. "You ever think about running one of these places?" she asked one day. I laughed. "Me? I'm still picking up the pieces." "Exactly," she said. "That's what makes you the right kind of person for it. You know what broken feels like. You won't forget." I started helping with budgets, with outreach, with scheduling volunteers. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was learning how to run a shelter from the inside out. One afternoon, a woman came in with 2 kids and nothing but the clothes on their backs. The little boy clutched a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. I found them a room, brought them dinner. When I handed her the keys, she looked at me and said, "You're the first person who's looked me in the eye in 2 days." That night I sat on the back steps of the shelter and just breathed. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just felt still, like my life had stopped spinning, even just for a moment. A few months later, Connie pulled me into her office. She was retiring. She wanted me to apply for her position. I froze. "I'm not that guy." She tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because I don't have it all figured out." "Marcus," she said, "no one does. But I've watched you stand in the fire and not run. That matters more than you think." I took the job. The first time I walked through the shelter as director, I felt like an imposter. But as weeks passed, I realized something. I wasn't faking it. I was growing into it. I started new programs, job training, addiction counseling partnerships, legal aid referrals. The shelter became more than a roof. It became a second chance for people who'd run out of firsts. And somewhere in all that noise and need, I found peace. Erin reached out a year later. A letter. She was remarried, expecting a child. She wished me well. I smiled when I read it. Not out of bitterness, just acceptance. We had been what we were, and now we were something else. That night, I visited the lake again, like I used to during those long, empty bike rides. I stood at the edge of the pier and stared out at the dark water. 5 years ago, I nearly jumped. Now I stood on the same spot, breathing in the cold, alive in a way I hadn't been back then. I thought about the people who'd walked through the shelter, Terrence, the woman with the 2 kids, the teenager who showed up barefoot in the snow. I thought about Sarah and how she still called me when things got heavy. I thought about Mom's hands gripping mine like I was her anchor. And I thought, this is what it means to matter. Not the title, not the paycheck. Just being the person people know will still be standing when the storm clears. Still breathing, still here, still climbing.